So they caused a lot of hubbub on Twitter, and eventually I think, the New York Times just decided that it was easier just to appease, the YA community.
Authors oftentimes have to walk a very, very, very shallow, skinny line, okay? Sometimes authors write with greed in mind, okay? In other words, they are driven by their greed instead of their passion. And a particular author who has actually done this with their book is Handbook for Mortals. And technically speaking, this book is one of the worst books to have ever been reviewed in Goodreads. I have not read the book. Therefore I will not necessarily talk about the content of the story. But from the general reviews that I have read, it seems to be generally terrible in every possible way. In fact, a lot of people think that this should have been the first ever manuscript for someone's first ever story. Like, this should be the first draft of the first book that someone ever wrote. That's the general consensus. And this book was not ready to be published. But you see, greed and a lot of these things can convince you that you are great, that you deserve way more than you actually are worth, right? And technically speaking, I believe this is what happened, because you see, Lani did not write Handbook for Mortals because she had a story, because there was passion, because she wanted to perfect her art. In other words, writing really was something different for her, right? Because you see, she is an actress. What she wanted was to write a book, that book becomes successful, and then that book, one more time, that book becomes a bestseller and it gets adapted as a movie, and then she can, take all of the money, right? That sweet George R. R. Martin dollars, right? And that is the definition of greed. This happened actually with speaking about George R. R. Martin, Game of Thrones, season 8 was actually ruined by greed with D&D, and they agreed to actually join Disney and work on this Star Wars project. So you see, greed and art do not come together. If you want to do art, you cannot be greedy, because the only way you can do good art is if you actually ignore the trends, if you ignore what people are doing, if you ignore what is now hot and selling, if you do not chase trends. Because I have never loved a book in my life that was chasing trends. I have never loved a book that had a lot of tropes. I have really never, my top 5 books are literally some of the most out there books ever, okay, in the fantasy genre, right? And this is crucial to understand. And Lani does not understand this, because you know why? She was blinded by the greed. She was blinded by the desire for money, for power, for fame. And she wrote a book that was so terrible, and she still thought it was good enough to publish. She thought it was good enough to publish. And that is what desire and these things can do to you. They can blind you so badly, so terribly, that you do not see how terrible your book is, yet you will still go out there and try to publish it as if it's one of the greatest works of art to have ever been penned. But you see, that's not where it ends. I wish that was where it ends, but that's really not where it ends. When the book published, you know what she did? She actually scammed everybody. She scammed everyone, and she went out there and bought copies of her book. She bought, I believe, 10,000 or something like that. And technically speaking, her book, because so many, copies were sold, the book Handbook of Mortals, it shot up into the bestsellers list in the New York Times bestsellers list. And that is a huge accomplishment for a book. It is really difficult to get into that list. It is insanely difficult. You see a lot of these, bestsellers, and nowadays people think that bestseller is nothing, but that's because you only see best-selling authors. You only go and you look at the top of the list and you buy the top books, okay? It means you are an average consumer. Yeah, if you think every author is a best-selling author, and if you think it's very easy to become a best-selling author, it's because you're an average consumer, and word of mouth, as well as, the popularity of books, is how books get to you. Okay, and generally speaking, to those who are more versed and to those who read like crazy, you will understand that it's really difficult to find a best-selling author, okay? And Lani became one, but she became one through scamming. She scammed her way into the New York Times bestseller list. And I find this to be absolutely crazy. First of all, I find it to be very entertaining, but also I find it to be very, very, very hilarious and very, very scary, because you see, after she did all of that, she was convinced that she was not the problem. You see, a lot of this stuff, fame, greed, money, it can blind you to your flaws. It can make you so blind to your flaws, you would literally be willing to lie to God. And that is what she believed. In fact, she was interviewed by New York Times and she said the following: "My personal opinion, I am a first-time author. I did some great numbers." Oh my God, she did great numbers, yes! And you scammed your way to those numbers. Anyhow, she continues and she says, "They put me on the list." She's talking about New York Times, she's talking about the New York Times, list, right? She's saying, "They put me there. The list is curated. They didn't have to put me on the list despite how many books I sold." When these people made a big issue, they were like, this is too much effort. And in this particular case, when she says, when these people made an issue out of it, well, she's talking about the people. The people don't like scamming, lying, scheming authors. The people will cancel you if you do that. And you deserve to be canceled, okay? Because you scammed your way into the New York Times bestseller list. You are literally attacking a system that is for talented people, for actually talented people, a way to climb up the social ladder. To many, it's a get out of poverty ticket, okay? Because they are very good at storytelling and they can't do much else in society. So you are a lying person. You are someone who is greedy. You wrote a book for money. You wrote a book for money, and it shows. The book, from not my opinion, because I haven't read it. I can't say what my opinion on the book is, but it seems to be a very terrible book in the popular conscience, right? And then number two, after you made the mistake and after people caught you and after people gave you a chance, you took an interview, after you had a chance to apologize, you doubled down. Do not double down when you make such a glaring mistake, when you try to scam a system so terribly, okay? And this is what happened. She scammed, she was caught, she doubled down. And this is what greed does to people. If you're ever going to write a book, don't write it for money. Don't chase trends. Don't write that book because you see others, they are doing this and, I'm just gonna scam my way to the New York Times bestseller. Don't do that, please, because you're gonna get cancelled, and when you get caught, you are going to be greedy and you will be blinded by your flaws and you will double down. And when you double down, your career is over, because guess what? Lani, her career in writing is over. There is no one in the world that will respect her after this. Anyhow, I will leave you with the following interview. It is an interview of the author. The interview was held April 20th, okay? The book was published April 15th. So 5 days ago, the book was published. Now, just now, as she is standing there in this interview, the people were catching up. The people were catching up, and there was a lot of backlash in the world for her, okay, in the internet and in social media for her. In this interview, she will pretend as if there is nothing wrong in the world. And I want you to really pay attention to her facial features and to her face, because guess what? You will notice the mark of someone who is blinded by their flaw, the mark of someone who cannot see that they have messed up. Just watch her facial features closely and you will see what I'm talking about. There's so much pain hiding behind, okay? Enjoy.
And I'm here with author and actress Lani Sarem. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And just enjoying the con, meeting you and Thomas and Henry Winkler. This is all great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's such a fun time. Everybody's so great and nice and friendly, and it feels like home at this point. We've done so many Wizard Worlds. We've done all of them for the past year or so.
Cool. So let's talk about the book right here, Handbook for Mortals, correct? So it was on the bestseller list for 23 hours, and then it got pulled off. Can you tell us what happened and why it got pulled off?
Well, it was number one on the New York Times bestseller list for 23 hours. It was 34 on the USA Today bestseller list, and that stayed. the reason that it got pulled off the New York Times list is it's a kind of it's more complicated than this, so I'm going to try to simplify it. But basically, the book came out because we had been pre-selling them at all these cons, and the only way to make book sales count when you sell them at cons is to push them through bookstores. And a lot of authors, most authors, publishers, do put the sales through bookstores. So we did what kind of everybody does, but I guess when the book came out, it showed up on the YA list, and it's technically not a YA book if you ask someone who's very in the book world, because the main character's in her 20s and not 13 to 18. And we didn't market it to the YA community. So the book hit the list because of our sales and our promoting at the Comic-Cons, and I think it just kind of threw the YA community off its kilter a little bit. They had not heard of the book because I hadn't really been marketing to them. I've been marketing in the Comic-Con world. It technically wasn't a YA book. So they caused a lot of hubbub on Twitter, and eventually I think, the New York Times just decided that it was easier just to appease, the YA community. But to be honest, it was kind of it was kind of a crazy ride, and I'm actually the only author that's ever been pulled off the list. So that kind of makes me cool in that way.
Well, it's kind of like an honor too, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm a rebel. I've always been a rebel.
Tell me what you think of the book. Have you read it? I haven't read it. So tell me if I should review it in the